Okay, we're here with Nick Castleton, the mayor of Eureka, and man, he's agreed to give us a special tour, and I'm excited about that. So, Nick,
come on in and I'll show you some things I'm sure you've never seen before and show you where it fits into the history of this great city of Eureka. This was at one time the second largest city, if you count the whole area, second largest west of the Mississippi, second only to San Francisco.
Really?
Yes, there were 10,000 people lived in this mining
In this little teeny valley here.
And the whole Tinnick mining district, there was 10,000 people at the turn of the century. Turn of the previous century.
Cool.
We're back a ways. I don't get in here very much anymore. And of course, if you have treasure, you have to have a place to keep
look
it.
at that.
This is the
That's cool.
What amazes me is as heavy as this is, there's no breaking into it and there's no hooking it onto your bumper. But they put so much work, and this is not decals.
This is the old original, huh?
And
hand painted?
They would hand paint these things inside. Who in the heck's going to see inside of your safe? The whole idea of the safe is to keep everybody out.
That's cool.
These
How old is this? What year was it made, do you think?
I think about 1880, 1890 in there somewhere. Made in Cincinnati, Ohio. Or no, yeah, Cincinnati, Ohio or Rochester, New York. Warner General Agent.
This is the museum.
Well, this is now one of the things that I think is really, really interesting. This is a three-dimensional map of the Tinnick Standard Mine. Oh, yeah. You can see each level. This is the 800 level, 900, 1,000, 1,100. Each level of the mine, and you can sit up here. The mine shaft was right here. And so you can see all of the activity that was right here. And then as it branched out, every day, the engineer or the surveyor, somebody in the engineering department would go down and measure a distance and direction on every place where they were working underground. Then they'd come back up and slip these glass panels out and draw it in on the map. So that now the boss, this is out in front of the boss's office. The boss could walk out into here. He's got the results of the assays from last night or yesterday, whatever, and so he could walk out and he'd say, okay, this drift right here is straight down here. We've got an assay from there, and it looks like if we turn right 3 degrees, we'll be right where we want to go, because we should intersect that next door body down there. This is all the surface up here. You can see the contours in here. This was the little town, and there was another mine here. You'll notice that these don't line up. For example, this is the 900 level here, and on this one that's 1100 level. That's because this was sitting lower, and you're measuring from the collar down how deep you are.
Pretty ingenious.
That is, pretty simple, but pretty ingenious.
In 1920, they took this up to Salt Lake and displayed it at the state fair, so people could see what was going on, because mining was huge in 1920.
Yeah.
It was the major source of income in the state of Utah was from mining.
Wow.
Mining and railroads were the only two things that brought money in to this area, into the state.
That is just amazing, all them tunnels like that.
My grandfather came out here as an assayer. So when you ran this little fire assay, you would measure a very, very exact amount of ore, ground up. You put it in here, and then had to have glass with it, and some other chemicals. Then you put it in this was hooked up to the muffle, and it was a furnace. And we'd heat this up to 1600 degrees. At 1600 degrees, everything that isn't metal would collect in with the glass. You can see the dirty glass in here?
Yeah.
That's all that is, just glass. That's silica that's been melted and made glass, but it's really dirty, so that's why it isn't clear anymore. You'd pour that out, and it looked like egg cartons. They were cast iron, so none of them ever survived because it was a cheap way to, easy cast iron to sell. And so you'd pour it into that. Everything that wasn't metal would rise to the top. And then my dad had a big iron table. He'd dump them out on that, and then he'd smack it with a hammer, and the glass would just shatter, and he'd brush that away. And that left you just a little bead of all the metals together. You take those metals and set them on a cupel. This is a cupel, that's made out of potash. And you'll never find a cupel that wasn't used because it'll just disintegrate back to potash. This was used, and if you were to grind that up, that's all of the metals except the gold and silver that was in that sample.
Huh.
And there would be, if you look really close, you can see that little dark spot in the middle.
Yeah.
That's where they called it a button. That's where the gold and silver would sit. And so he would take that gold and silver out and put it on these scales and weigh it. And then you'd run sulfuric acid over it. And then the sulfuric acid would eat the silver. Now you didn't lose the silver, you just cycled the sulfuric acid around and around and around till there was a lot of silver in the sulfuric acid. Then you would put it in the furnace and cook the sulfuric acid off, and it'd leave you a bar of silver. But the piece that you had left was just a little teeny tiny fleck. You could barely see it most of the time. And you would take that and put it back in here and weigh it, and then you knew how much gold there was in that. Subtract that from your first number, and that's how much silver you had. So this was the process just for the gold and silver.
What was your dad's name?
John Castleton. My grandfather's name was George T. Castleton. This was his scales. He came out here in 1905 from Salt Lake City. But I've seen my dad do it many times because my dad took over the business when Grandpa died. And people would come in while we were working and they'd say, well, how small is something can you weigh on that? You know, it looked like it's pretty technical. Remember, this is a balance scale. This has no electronics whatsoever, no electricity, nothing. It's just a balance scale. But you have to open that door to put whatever in because your breathing would just drive it crazy.
So it's pretty sensitive. Huh?
Very, very sensitive. He'd take a piece of paper, always use a pair of tweezers because you didn't want to touch it. You'd take a pair of tweezers and tear off a piece of paper about the size of your thumbnail, put it in there and weigh it, and he'd say, well, you can't weigh anything. No, this is just showing you something. He'd put it back in there, or he'd put it in and weigh it, and then he'd take it out with these tweezers, set it on the counter, and he'd do one of two things. He'd either take his pencil and just drop it like that and weigh it and say, here's how much graphite there is in that dot.
Wow.
Or if it was somebody, that wanted to, he'd say, just put your thumb on that. And he'd put your thumb on that like that. And he'd put it back in there and he'd say, here's how much your fingerprint weighs.
Wow.
He could weigh their fingerprint. All this in that notebook right there.
Yeah.
That's my grandfather's. That was October 1st, 1919. These were the different samples that he ran. That was the results he got over on the side. So this was who we got them from, John Strasberg, and this was how much each one of them had. Whether it was gold, silver, lead, copper, and zinc. Some people would come in with a really high grade sample, and they said, I want all of the sample back, but he had to grind it up. So rather than putting it through the electric grinder that had grind it up, you got to grind this dirt down to flour consistency. And so you take this, you dump that one, if they really wanted it back, you dump it onto the table, on that iron table about that big around, then you'd smack it with this, and then you'd grind it up. And so, I don't have anything solid enough here, but you can see how rocks.
Oh, you just
So
rock it back and forth on it. Ah.
And you'd sweep it back in.
Huh.
And that's how you'd grind it down to the flour consistency.
Yeah.
That's pretty heavy. First you'd smack it a couple of times. It was tough enough. You know, break it up into kind of small stuff and then just keep grinding it on down.
Man, this is awesome, Nick. Thanks. Thanks, Aaron.
Hey, but here's the thing. This is how I feel about it. So if you're looking for a treasure, I think it's important to know how it's made. I think it's important to know the process of where it became valuable, how it is. I mean, the fact that it takes all these processes actually make gold more valuable, because not everybody can just have it. You can't. It's a huge system. The mine spends millions now in processing.
Millions, billions.
One time I was in Nevada though, and there was a warehouse just full of barrels, and it was all tiny particles of gold that they didn't have the money to process it or the means or whatever, and so it was just waiting to be separated out. You know what I mean?
Well,
And so much of this, and then you learn from this kind of this archaic way of making, how they used to do it, more than nuggets. I mean, he has stories of just the old nuggets they used to find, and some of that stuff, that silver up here, remember, on top of the mountain? We got to show them so much.
well,
It's like a whole year it could take us.
most of the Eureka area, Tinnick Mining District, was silver and lead. Galena.
Gold and silver, not just coal.
Oh, man, that's heavy. Feel that, Jim?
No,
Now, is that silver or is that galena?
That's Galena. This would be 70–80% lead, with probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 or 600 ounces of silver per ton.
Huh?
In that one. But that's basically the pure stuff you're looking for. Normally you don't find it quite that pure. You got to take several tons.
Actually, that fits that story that I was just talking about. The one where he finds that big old chunk of silver, didn't know it was silver. Remember that?
Well, yeah,
And he tried to make bullets out of it.
Nesbitt
Nesbitt.
he was running the Eureka Hill mine over here. And one day he just walked up into the canyon, and up above the mine, and there were some great big boulders up there, and he thought these look like they're pretty good stuff. So he chipped off some and had it assayed. It was pure horn silver. He got, I think, from what I recall, it was $11,000 out of those 6 boulders.
Just up there, boulders up there.
Just laying on the surface.
Wow.
After the story came out.
That was what year?
In about 1904, 1905, right in.
So we got $6,000 back then.
Yeah.
Wow.
One of the interesting things about mining in Eureka was this was the only place where there was mining and Mormons kind of connected. So Jesse Knight, we all know Jesse Knight was, and he
He's
says,
a big
oh,
believer in being a steward of the wealth that he had.
yeah, that sign you saw downstairs was the riches of the earth were put here for all mankind, not for any man to build an empire unto himself. Yeah. So that was always his mantra. In fact, right here, another cool story of it. You're looking for treasures, kind of treasure. Highlights. Okay. Okay. This is the register of arrests. March 17th, 1896. H.F. Fuller or whatever, he was keeping a gambling house. Wow. Awful. March 17th, 1896. Fanny Gambonia, keeping a gambling house. March 17th, 1896. Sophia Reiser, keeping a house of ill fame. This is one of the ladies that worked for her. Prostitution. The madam paid $20.
I forgot about the
Prostitute was $5. Prostitute $5. Prostitute
Okay,
$5.
calm down, buddy.
Prostitute $5. It was against the law to run a house of ill fame or a gambling house, but you didn't throw them in jail. You send them back to work. You find them and send them back to work. There was your income for the city.
Okay.
So, I mean, right there, he made, just off of the house of ill repute, he got $25, $30, $35, $40 right here.
In the 1800s, 1890s, that's a lot of money.
That was a lot of money. That was just in one day. He got 20 for the gambling houses and 50 for the ladies at the whorehouse. So, big money. That paid to keep the city going. This is a mucking machine. The mucking machine was invented at the North Lily mine by Bert Royal. And what it is, your mining drifts, tunnels is what you'd call them, but a tunnel in mining terms is a drift. It goes back in. So you didn't want to make them really wide, but it was, you'd drill and blast, and then take a shovel and shovel it into the mine cars. And Bert said, there's a better way to do this. We need a front end loader. And they said, well, we're not going to make the drifts wide enough that you can scoop it up and turn your front end loader around. He says, okay, then we need a front end loader, a back end unload. So this will swivel side to side. So you drill and blast. You run your rail right up to the face before you blast. And if you drill, when you're drilling, you drill a whole series of holes, and it depends on how hard the rock is, how many holes you have to drill. But you always start, there's one hole right in the middle. You don't ever put any dynamite in it. And you put a series of holes around it, and another series of holes, another series of holes. Then and when you blast, there's a time delay on each one. So you got one, it might be 4 sets of dynamite go off at the same time, might be 6, might be 8. But depending on how big your face is and how hard the rock is. But it'll always go boom, 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 boom. And the last one, you have a whole series of holes across the very bottom. And those are called lifters. And so after everything else gets busted all to pieces, then this one blows up and it blows that dirt back this way onto the track that you've already laid up against the face. So now this on the railroad tracks can scoop up, and you scoop from one side to the other, but every time you go to, you got 2 handles here, and you're standing on a pedestal. So this handle runs the bucket, this one runs the wheels. So it's got 2 pneumatic motors. One pneumatic motor here to run the bucket, one underneath to run the wheels. So when you scoop that up, and you get the bucket full, then you go to throw it in the back of the, into that car that's behind you. You got it chained to it. So as you go back up, this wheel here comes up. No matter where it hits, it centers that thing. Yep. So when it gets to the top to throw it, it's centered and thrown right straight into the car. So you aren't throwing it over here and over there. Herbert Hoover came out here in 1932. Herbert Hoover was a mining engineer. I found out about this kind of secondhand. There was a guy that had bought what they called the Hoover Woody Wagon. It was a 1931 Model A Ford Woody station wagon, but they had taken the wood off and taken the seats out of the back and made it into a pickup truck. And he had 5 of these around the country. And this guy bought the Woody wagon in a box out of Provo. And he took it to Wildemar, California and restored it. Did an absolutely perfect, beautiful job. Went back to Wisconsin to the same mills that milled the wood for Henry Ford. They have a picture of Henry Ford's signature on the blueprints to order the wood from this wood mill back in Wisconsin. And there's birch and maple. And the maple's the bigger part that sticks out, holds the rest of it in. The birch is the back layers. And so he bought the wood using the same equipment back in Wisconsin as that was when it was manufactured. Wow. And then put it into this in California. Wow. But after he got it all restored, he wanted to know, he says, I know they said this belonged to Herbert Hoover, but why did Herbert Hoover have a Woody wagon in Provo, Utah? You have to say that kind of slow, because get your tongue all tangled up. Anyway, so he stopped. He went up, him and his wife had gone to Yellowstone, and they were on their way home. They stopped in Provo and went to the library, because they didn't know where else to go. They went to the Provo library and asked the lady there if she knew why would Herbert Hoover have a Woody wagon in Provo, Utah. And she said, I don't know. I have no idea. But you're in luck. The Provo historian is in the building, and his office is right down the hall. So she took him down and introduced him to the historian. So he asked the historian that question. The historian says, I know exactly why he had it here. Herbert Hoover was a mining engineer. When he got out of the presidency, he got into the presidency because he got a lot of notoriety for building the Panama Canal, which was a huge mining operation, basically. And so that propelled him into the presidency. After the presidency, he went back and he bought stock in a whole bunch of mines because that's where the money was. And then, because he's a mining engineer, he would go check on his holdings and make sure that those mines were making the maximum amount of profit that they could, so he was getting the maximum dividend off of his money. And so he came out and he would visit, and he had several holdings in Utah. He had stock in the Lark, United Park City Mines, and the Gemini. So when he found out that this particular time, Herbert Hoover came to Provo, and there was a story in the Daily Herald, at Provo Daily Herald, said Herbert Hoover has been in town, or he came to town, to check on a piece of equipment that was invented in Eureka that was changing the way they were doing mining. And so he checked it out, and the one in Eureka that he was held interest in was the Gemini. And he was several times he came out for that. But this particular time in 1932, he came out to check on this piece of equipment.
Cool.
Because he had never seen one anywhere else. They were using them around here, but this was the first ones.
It was, at one time, wasn't it third? Like, it was high up on the mining scale of the nation. Like,
right. Well,
it was third,
yeah,
or
this was third, depending on what you're talking about.
Silver.
My grandfather was in the city council in 1914. He was elected in 1913. He was elected on my dad's birthday in November 2nd, 1913. He took over in January 1914 in the city council. I was doing research in our old city hall down here. There was a coal furnace down in the basement, and then there were just records everywhere. And so I went down and was digging through these records to try to figure out what was going on in Eureka in 1914 to 1918 when he was on the city council. I pulled a piece of paper out of a box. I'd open a box and just pull a piece of paper in the front, in the middle, and the back. I pulled one out of about the middle of the box, and it said June 14, 1947. And I thought, well, that isn't anywhere near what I need. So I went to put it back in. As I went to put it back into the box, I noticed on the bottom it said, carbon copy David O. McKay. That's interesting. This wasn't a Mormon town. It was a mining town. So why would the mayor and the city council be writing a letter to David O. McKay, or a carbon copy to him? The address was to the chairman of the Days of 47 Centennial Committee. Some Greek name. I can't remember his name. Anyway, it went through the church group up here, the young men, young women, had asked for the queen of the Days of 47 to come and ride in the parade in August, and had been turned down. And when the mayor and the council found out about it, they were a little upset. And so they wrote a letter back to the chairman of the committee and said, do you understand the importance of Eureka? Here's all the money that you're using to run the whole state of Utah. A big percentage of it is coming from Eureka. So you really need to send her out. And it said, here's why. And it said, they had a list of how much gold, silver, lead, copper, and zinc had come out of the mining district from 1869 until 1947. In June of 2014, so 100 years later, when I found this, I looked up those prices then. If I'd have had that amount of gold, silver, lead, copper, and zinc on that day, it was worth $12.2 billion. So I don't know if she came out. I never heard any more.
Yeah.
I don't know if she came and rode in the parade after they belittled them, but that was their response.
Cool. Nick, you're kind of a national treasure yourself.
What am I telling you? Hey, let's get in this thing. Isn't this cool history? Look at all the documented. It's When you look up right now, when those guys are mining, they're looking for 47 different types of elements or minerals.
Minerals.
Yeah, they're used for different
Everything from
things.
the clay.
We live in a time where people have these phones and they have everything. They forget that everything comes from the earth. Everything comes from a harvest. The mine, the ground, you know what I mean? Like nothing is made. Just all.
Well, nothing is made from nothing. They have
That's
to
what I mean.
In the United States, there were 2 double loop trestle systems. This one over here in Pinyon Canyon, and the other one was in between Truckee and Reno, up over the Sierra Nevadas.
I wish that was the other.
And you see here, there's a train coming in here, comes around, loops around, comes back around here,
Oh, wow.
over here, and then up and around. That Shays steam engine weighs 400,000 pounds.
Wow.
It can pull about a 2–2.5% grade because steam isn't a constant torque. Well, it'll go boom, or boom. So you get about a 3% grade, and the steel wheels on steel rails just breaks traction and it just sits there and spins. When they got to diesel electric, the reason they went to diesel electric, not straight diesel, was because an electric motor is much smoother.
That's Jesse right there.
This is Uncle Jesse. Everybody call him Uncle Jesse.
How many mines were in Silver City?
Wow.
A lot.
A lot. Silver City probably only had 8 or 10 that really produced.
Okay.
Your biggest mines were what here? Your biggest ones?
The big 4 was the Chief, the Centennial Eureka, the Eureka Hill, and the Bullion Beck and Champion. And then of course the Gemini was really close right in there. So when you say how many mines, it really depends on what you want to call it. How many mines were there that made good profit, or how many holes in the ground were there? Because the holes in the ground, there were thousands. Profitable mines, there were hundreds. Really profitable mines, 30. So it just depends on what you're, you know, where do you draw the line? But we can go over here, you can still see these 2 look like mine dumps, and people, when I go up in there with my ATVs, they say, well, those look like mine dumps, but it doesn't go to a mine. No, it wasn't a mine. They cut in here and then they filled out this way and out here so that they could build this trestle. The engineer who designed this trestle here had a nervous breakdown the day before these pictures were taken. This was the grand opening. You can see it stopped here. This one stopped. There's people standing on top of there. So these are posing for the pictures here, but he wasn't absolutely 100% sure that was going to hold. And he worried so much about it, he had a nervous breakdown the night before they tried it out. You can see a guy standing here,
Factions right here?
or standing around just, you know, watching, like I said, it's a photo op. This is the Mammoth Mine, the next canyon over. The West Tinnick Valley was granted to Sam Houston out of Houston, Texas, for his service in the Texas Rangers, which was very common. They didn't have a Social Security or anything back in those days, so what you was given as your retirement was a way that you could make a living. And even if you couldn't get out and do the work as a rancher, you could hire people and you could still make money doing this. So he was granted the West Tinnick Valley. He died in 1851, so he never got up here by the time the Mormons got in here settling and things were growing here. He'd already passed away. So the McIntyre brothers came out. They drove 800 head of Texas Longhorns from Houston, Texas area out to the West Tinnick Valley. When they get out here, the Chisholm brothers had found ore here at the Mammoth Mine. Actually, they found it up there originally. They dug it out of here. This was what the main entrance to get the ore out of the mountain. But here's where they found it. They, got the name because we got ourselves a mammoth strike here. So they wanted to make enough money mining so that they could do what they always dreamed about doing, and that was be cowboys and own their own cow herds. So they see all those cows out there and they go, wow, I wonder what this is all about. So they jump on their horses and head out there, Howard and Frank McIntyre, and they get out there and they sit down and talk to Howard and Frank, or the two Chisholm brothers do. And before morning, after a few pints of whiskey or whatever, the Chisholm brothers now own half of that herd of Texas Longhorns, so they own 400 head of Texas Longhorns, and the McIntyres now own the Mammoth Mine. So the Chisholms headed north with their cows. I don't know where they ended up in towards Canada somewhere, I think. So the McIntyres now start operating the Mammoth Mine too, as well as the cows out in the West Tennessee Valley. So when Utah became a state in 1896, the McIntyres had been making some good money for many years. 1906, the state of Utah is building the state capitol. And so the McIntyre brothers go up and knock on the door of the governor. When you got that kind of money, you don't talk to the secretary. You just go in and talk to the governor. So they go in and tell the governor, we want a tour of this place. So he goes out and gives them a tour of this capitol. He says, wow, this is beautiful. This is awesome. But you're missing something where maybe we didn't see it. Where Utah is going to become a very popular place to visit. You're going to have celebrities from Europe. What if the Queen of England were to come and visit with the governor to see this great state of Utah? She's going to expect to be properly entertained. And where are you going to sit down and have proper tea with the Queen of England? And the governor says, we're not going to waste taxpayer money on sheer elegance. That doesn't make any sense. I said, okay, I understand. You tell us where you want this elegant place and we'll decorate it. So they said, okay, here's the room. And they decorated the gold room at the state capitol. Every ounce of gold in the gold room at the state capitol came out of the Mammoth Mine and was donated by the McIntyres, along with the gilding. Have you ever been into the gold room?
It's beautiful.
I haven't.
Those mirrors, they got the mirror set on each side so you can see infinity if you get out there. Did you go out in the middle and look in those mirrors?
Yeah.
Did you really?
It's awesome.
They don't normally let people out there. You were really lucky probably because you have an official looking badge on that they let you in there. But I was in high school and we did a tour. We just was killing time. And a guy took us on a tour and showed us all these things. And we were only interested in the race car out there. You know, we were 16, 17 years old.
The Blue Flame.
Yeah. No, the Mona Meteor.
Oh, okay.
The first one to set the world land speed record out on the salt flats.
Jenkins.
What's that?
Jenkins was his
Yeah,
name.
Abe Jenkins. Abe Jenkins, Mormon Meteor. So, but anyway, we went along with the whole thing. Yeah, we're interested. Yeah, sure we are. 17-year-old kids interested in history? Yeah, sure. So we go into the gold room, and there's a rope across, so you can't step out under the rug. That's kind of a fancy thing anyway. And he tells us this memorized spiel of the whole thing. And this is an older gentleman, probably almost as old as I am now. And he finishes his memorized spiel and he walks over to the door and he looks up and down the hall, pulls the door closed, and locks the door. And he says, just because you guys are from Eureka, you have a tie to the history, step over that rope and walk out so that you can see in those mirrors, see infinity. And so we were able to do that. But he made sure nobody else would know that he'd done that.
Cool.
Why was it brought to Eureka?
I remember the guy that brought it.
Catholic church is here in Utah.
Yeah, the oldest Catholic church in the state of Utah is just up the road here.
Really?
That makes
church.
sense. Yeah, they wanted to get in. Everybody wanted to get in on it, too. Eureka at the time. I mean, I don't know if they've done total justice. It's not all it's kind of done.
They restored this, obviously.
There'll be a light in here, don't they?
So tell us what we're in here. What is this? Tell me about this.
So Porter Rockwell had his main ranch out in Lehigh, and then there was a good spring out there to Cherry Creek, and so he ended up out at Cherry Creek. Just had another ranch out there, sheep, mostly sheep. And this was the first building they built out there, was the cabin. You can see here it was caving in, and it was just falling to pieces. So the Historical Society here said, will you give it to the city, to the Historical Society, and they brought it back in. You can see everything was kind of into place still, so they were able to mark it and bring it back in here and then, put it back up just like it was. Yeah, I remember that. It was so. And then every couple of years they go back out in the same area and get some of the clay and dirt around there and mix it with water and come in and chink the cracks in there. So this is still original stuff. Any chinking that they've done since then is from the same mud that they were using at the time out there. Same with the roof here. They put a new roof over the top of it so that it wouldn't leak quite so bad. And then, but they still go back out there in that area and trim. If they have to replace anything, they go back out and try to keep it as authentic as they can. Porter Rockwell was the U.S. Marshal. Had talked to Brigham Young. He said, I need all of your members to come together here. We've got some problems. And so we want to meet at the tabernacle. I said, okay. So they go to the tabernacle, and he gets up there and he has a picture of Porter Rockwell, and he says, this is a bad, bad guy, and we need to catch him and get him off the streets. He's killed however many people, and he's done all these things, and we need your help to find him, because he's disappears into the woodwork every time we think we know where he is. And he goes on, and pretty soon, after he'd been going on for a while, guy third row back in the tabernacle stands up and he said, I have you know, mister, I ain't never killed a man who didn't deserve to be killed. He turned around and walked out of the tabernacle, and the members got in, cleared the way for him. Of course, they got in the way of the marshal, and the marshal couldn't get to him. He turned around and walked out.
Let's just walk by these buildings. You can look inside here.
Okay, this road coming in was the railroad. And the railroad came in right across, and in between, there's two parts of this. You can see there's a chute coming this way and a chute coming that way. This was one of the early places where they did what they call contract mining. The mining company would sink the shaft and work back in and find the big deposits of ore. Once they get this great big deposit of ore out, there's little feelers of it here and here and here and here that's just as good as ore, but it's in smaller bodies. So it takes a little more personal care to get it out. The mine wasn't interested in that. So they would lease it to some of their best miners. And they would get 10% of anything they made, plus they would charge so much for every trip up or down the shaft. If you was hauling timber down or out, so you tried not to haul any waste out. You always put the waste in behind, threw it behind somewhere, filled up a hole down here, but you didn't want to hoist it to the surface because it cost you the same amount to hoist some waste that you threw out over the dump. Cost the same as what you put into an ore car and sold it to the smelter. When you got a car full, then you would order a railroad car from the railroad, ship it. You would ship it to the smelter. The smelter would assay it and say, okay, here's your check. And they'd cut them a check for whatever the value was less the smelting cost. And then they would go in and give the company 10%, and then pay for whatever things they'd used. You know, if they used wood or nails or whatever, they had to pay for all of that in addition to the trips up and down.
Huh.
And so these contract miners in 1950-ish, when I was just a kid, I knew some of my friends, their dads were contract miners. They were making, $500-600 a week. In 1950, you could buy a brand new car off the showroom for $750.
Wow.
So they were making enough money to buy a new car. A new car now for the similar kind of thing would cost what, $30,000? So they were making equivalent of $20,000 to $25,000 a week.
Wow.
Contract mining. Everyone, you can see. We walk in here, you can see. You'll have better pictures. Yeah, if it falls down, anything up there, why? Tell my wife I love her. You can still see how the railroad came right in here, and right in this way. Now it's overgrown so much it's hard to see. Get over here where you can see. See those little wheels along
Yep.
here? Every one of those opens a chute. And so they could park the railroad car right here. And that chute, when it's full, is one railroad car.
Ah.
And so that belonged to one of the contract miners. When he got it full, he knew he had a shipment, and he'd ship out a railroad car full, 230,000 pounds.
Huh.
But you can see you had them on both sides. So there was going all the way back on both sides.
Cool.
But you could bring the ore cars right in here just for them. The miner, when the ones for the mine, they were bringing it out in dump trucks full and hauling it down and dumping it in railroad cars on down the hill here a little ways, generally.
About what year did they build this?
This was built in, as far as I can tell, about 1910, 1912, through those years.
Who owns it now? Is it owned by
Chief.
Chief owns it?
Chief.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, people tell me, well, we want to keep Eureka small and quiet like it always has been. I said, you don't have any idea.
Yeah. It used to be noisy. Trains and blasting and everything
The
else,
trains
huh?
came up every day. Every one of these hoists, every time it come to the top, it was bang, bang, and dumping ore, big rock solo, and I mean, it was a noisy, noisy place.
This is one of the reasons why I'm passionate about what you're doing and what he's doing, because this idea that the town has, just don't do anything, it's just a matter of time. We've gone in mines, there was nothing, week later, it's vandalized, it's this or that, you know what I mean? Like, either do something with it to protect and preserve it, or just forget it.
go to trash.
Okay, you notice these cables, one wraps on the top and one wraps on the bottom. So when that's going around, one of those cages is going down and the other one's coming up.
Huge.
So, and you can disconnect them. You got a dial here and a dial there that tells you where each one of these are. So if you're shipping off the 900 level, you put one of the cages right here, you put the other one, and you get it exactly where you want it on the 900 level. Now you lock the two together. Now, every time I go up here, these guys up here on the surface can take the full cars off and put an empty car on. The guys down at the bottom at the 900 level are doing just the reverse. They're taking off an empty car and putting a full car on. Then you'll trade and trade and trade.
So how deep is this one? This one's
1,800 feet.
1,800?
There's some water in it now, though, so you don't get it quite that far. Unless
You had to come to work every day and just be lower down this bad boy. I mean, just think
it's no big deal.
1,800 feet. I just got done working in a mine that we was down 4,000 foot level.
The one down here went
Yeah.
1,800 feet down, and you moved over a quarter of a mile, and it dropped another 3,000 feet.
Oh, yeah?
you probably have worked on mines. You're commercial.
Just
Well, I have, yeah.
Oh, well, whatever, bud. I guess it's not a big deal.
Well, this old stuff is. I don't know, modern.
Anyway, but this should be a place where people can come visit safely.
Hope I didn't get too big of a rock for you there.
I think it was up there.
But you have to get it about right in here is about where it goes the farthest. So, okay, are we ready?
You
Try
do
to
have
count.
some big rocks, bud. What's up with that?
I never did hear it, did you?
It's still going.
What the heck?
Are we gonna count? What's going on?
I was counting. I counted to 20, and I still did. I never heard anything. The wind got blowing, and I think it
Yeah,
just
the
made
wind.
enough noise up here that I missed it.
No, but that was a good drop, bud, 'cause I didn't hear nothing. You said it's full of water down there now?
Well, there's water in the bottom for sure.
Okay, ready?
Okay, you say go when you let it go.
Set. Go.
There, I heard that one.
About 7.
Yeah, I had 8. Pretty close.
Yeah, that was.
But mine didn't do that.
I love hearing that go.
Yeah, yours. I didn't hear yours. at
I think
all.
it's still
was sitting
going.
there.
I think you found the hole, bud. Center of the earth, right there, bud.
It'll be in China in an hour and a half.
It's so cool.
Mist.
I just think that's how we
In
honor
the
them.
wintertime, this will be just a
Because I mean,
cloud coming out of here. all the
I
time.
work around cranes. I work around. I mean, look at what they put up
Where's your
by
dog?
hand. I mean, what's up?
Kevin's next.
Those timbers
Yeah.
are huge.
Kevin's name?
Go ahead, Kev.
She's got a bigger rock than you. She's just going to take
He will let us climb up to the top of this.
Ready? Barely hear that.
Did you hear it? I didn't hear it. You heard it, huh?
I heard it. I think I heard it about 12.
I've never even heard it.
I just heard.
Okay, you gave her too big of a rock.
No.
Okay, hold on. Don't drop it yet. Don't drop it yet, Utah.
Oh wait, don't drop it yet. You're being filmed.
Okay.
Oh, the suspense is killing me.
Heard it.
About 7.
Man, I just love hearing the
Did you
drag.
hear this one?
All right, send me down.
Send him down.
Let's do
You
it.
got to ring the bell. 'Cause we don't know where you're going.
Ring the bell, bud. Ring it.
No, there's a cable alongside the cage there, and you reach out and you go, bup, 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 bup.
Oh, really?
That means I'm going to the 900.
I know it's
The
down
700 would be
Yes.
beep, beep. Then if you're going to the next level down, each level is one more, bing, bing, bing. So you go 1, means I'm going down, and then 2. And if you're coming up, and you want to come all the way to the top, you just beep, 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 beep.
I just love this head frame, man. It's so huge, massive,
Man, it is a huge.
monster.
That is a huge head frame.
The guy come up here with us and he says, "Can I go up to the top?" And I said, "I don't give a damn, but I ain't going to come and rescue you." He climbed up there, and then he got up and he looked at it and he went to come down. He says, "Oh shit! How do I get down?" And I said, "Same way you got up, and I ain't coming up." Every shift, I would have to climb up to the top. When I was working at the Trixie, I'd climb up and grease the shifts
This is the guy right here.
and check everything and make sure the bearings are good. They aren't heating up or anything.
Make sure all those little steps are. If something happens, we'll tell a really good story, bud.
Yeah, I got it on video for your family, Shem, if something happens.
We'll show it at your funeral.
You make up a good story, bud. Trust me. Yeah, it's cool, man. Perspective on life.
Yeah, it's a ways up here.
Yeah, how high do you think that is? Are you good at that?
Probably about 60 feet.
Look around up there. There's not a lot of people that spend time up there, but there might be something cool.
lead that gets in your blood that you die from.
You like this? You never get bored of this kind of stuff?
No, that's awesome.
No, I keep telling
You could eat lead every day.
Every time you tell the story, I hear more information. I'm like,
Oh, yeah?
I'm going to download you, bud.
Really?
Yeah, because we're going to lose him
Yep.
someday. And like, no one knows what he knows. You had like the smith, the blacksmith over here. You see, and you have this, and these are all the offices of the mine.
Yeah.
What's that? Request for leaving.
As you go through it, a lot of it has kind of been thrown, this or that, but there's still like little things here and there. You just kind of see the
I know
story.
why they got lead poisoning. And so they came up and tested the kids that were having issues with learning.
But I mean, look at that thing. Just makes you want to go in there. I bet Shem would go in there. He seems crazy.
Shem's still up there. He coming down yet?
We'll
I
see you
went
later,
over to the hill
Shem.
yesterday and looked down there, and you can see it. You get
This
up
house
here,
over here, I think I'm going to...
down where you are.
It's a
You're
precast.
You get up here, look at the far range down over there.
I think we should build more precast. I know the truth. 3-4 walls. See, that one has shelves in it. There's some cool little architecture inside that one.
Yeah, we owned a little house down here for a while.
We'll build you a new one.
Shem, that's so cool you did that, bud.
That's pretty cool in here. They got probably for their assay furnaces. Probably the old assay furnaces right there. Look at that, Gordon.
Here, this is your counter when you come in.
Thing the last
Bill, what's that? No, I don't think so. This is where you do your business transactions.
I love that. If you go up in those trees right there, you tell them there's that cold steam. Look at that, all the beams still there.
Yeah,
See that little
and still in dang good shape. Even though, I mean, the water never sits on them. They'll get wet a little bit once in a while, but it doesn't stay on them long enough to cause them even to work.
secure, yeah. And I guarantee you 2,000, and I'm not, I know there's not treasure in all of them, but 2,000 mines, Juab County alone, and
Okay, this is the Jesse Knight School. Jesse Knight in 1903 built this school, and he hired a teacher. And then after 1 year, he went down to Juab School District and said, okay, here's your school. And I don't know for sure how many, it probably had 4 rooms, it looks like. And so we got this school. I won't give you the school, but you can use it because we use it for the church. It's the town everything, the school, the church, the town hall, everything. So the county came up here, the school district came up and did a survey. There was 500 people living in this little bowl right here.
500 houses here.
Well, 500 people living.
Wow. So there was a bunch of houses up here.
Yeah. Taken from up there, you see a town right in here.
Wow,
On both
there's
sides, there was
nothing here
businesses along the road there, and then there were houses all the way up into here and all the way up into there.
Wow.
And so Jesse Knight told them that they had to hire the teacher. And they came up and surveyed the town. And of course, a lot of the workers were just workers. They are older and they'd come in later in life. And so they didn't have a lot of kids, some of them. And so the school district said, we're not going to hire the teacher. He says, you're not? Why not? This is Juab County. You should hire the teacher. And they said, well, you don't have enough students. He said, you're kidding. How many more students do I need? And they said, 3. And he says, give me a minute. And he goes over to Dividend. There's a guy over there with 8 kids, all school age. And he walks up to him and he says, hey, I need you to go to work for me. And he says, I got a pretty dang good job I like right here. And he says, and this is working for Tinnick Standard. And Dividend was a company town, Tinnick Standard's town. The mine owned the town, which was quite common in most areas of mining. That was the only mining town in the Tinnick Mining District. So he says, Jesse tells him, well, if you'll come up and go to work for me, I'll give you a house. And he says, I got a perfectly nice house right here. And he said, yeah, but this house belongs to the company, not to you. I'll give you the house and it'll be yours. You can do with it whatever you want. And he says, well, that's interesting, but he says, I kind of like this, where I am. He says, I'll raise your pay. I'll give you 20% more than what you're making. And he says, wow, that and a house? Okay, what do you need me to do anyway? And he says, oh, I don't know, we'll find you something. And he says, wait a minute, you come down here to hire me? And you don't even have a job for me? And he says, oh, I don't care about you, I just need your kids in my school. And so he came up and goes to work for him, and now the county had to come up and hire the teacher. And Newell, Jesse's dad, died. And so his mother, Lydia, didn't feel like she could make the trip on without her husband. So she stayed in Iowa and went to work for families and sewing and cleaning and doing things. Eventually, the next year, she let her wagon go on with another family to Salt Lake. They bring the wagon back to Iowa, and she looks at the oxen. She says, those oxen won't make that trip again. So she borrows money from the Perpetual Immigration Fund, and then she comes on to Salt Lake City. When she gets to Salt Lake, they send her to Payson. And so she's in, Jesse was basically raised in the Payson area. Because he's the baby, as his older brothers and sisters get married and move away, now by the time he's 11 years old, he's the man of the house. And so he goes to work. And he goes to work driving supply wagons. The trains are coming in, mining's getting started. And Jesse always had a thing for the underdog. Well, in Utah, the Mormons weren't the underdogs. And so he felt for the Gentiles, or the miners and the railroad workers, he had a thing for them because he felt like they were being somewhat persecuted, kind of like the Mormons had been back east. And so he went away, he kind of fell away from the church for quite a while. As they're living there in Payson, in the area where their sewer treatment plant is there now, and he's got a farm there, and he's married and got kids of his own, and a rat falls into the well and poisons the well, and all of the family gets sick. And his wife says, his little girl is so sick, they're afraid she's going to die. And she tells Jesse, I want the elders to come and give her a blessing. And he says, I don't believe in that stuff. And she says, okay, you're still the boss. But he looks and he sees that she is close to death. And so he goes out, finds his little place, talks to God and says, okay, you won. I'll go back to church. I'll start doing the things I know I've been supposed to be doing if you'll let my daughter live. And he goes back and tells his wife, call the elders and have them come and give her a blessing. They come and give her a blessing, and she starts getting better right away, and she makes it. So he does what he told God he would do. He starts going back to church, but he's never a bishop or anything else. So, but he's still a good head on his shoulder, for business and stuff. So he's in business. He's got a farm down there, a ranch, and he's in business ventures with some of his friends and stuff. And he finds out that his friend, who is also in business with him, is trying to take advantage of him in a business deal. And he says, I don't know what to do. Do I approach him? I don't know. I don't know how to handle this. So he says, I take my cows, and I'm up letting the cows graze along Godiva Mountain.
That's right up here.
That's this mountain. And he said, I'm sitting under a pine tree contemplating what I should do. And this impression, he wouldn't ever call it a vision. He says, this impression comes to me that the riches of this mountain was put here for the Mormons. Now, there's a lot of mining going on this mountain, but all of it's on the west side.
There already was a lot of mining going on.
A lot of mining, Mammoth, Silver City, Eureka was even going. This is 1891.
Ah.
And so he comes up, and when this voice comes to him, he says, that's not my problem. I'm not a bishop. I'm not a stake president. I'm not in the Council of 12. Go tell somebody that cared.
It wasn't just about
He didn't
love.
want the attention himself, and he didn't feel like it was his position to bail out the church, basically. But he can't get it out of his mind. So he goes up, and he goes around on the other side. And I can show you where I am absolutely positive I know where Jesse Knight was sitting when he had this impression.
Yeah.
Because there's only one place on this whole mountain where there's pine trees that you can sit
Explains
under.
exactly the spot.
These
Really?
cedar trees, the pinyon trees around here, the pinyon pine, the branches come down, they come out from the bottom. You don't sit under a pinyon tree and contemplate your life's problems.
Yeah.
You sit under a tall pine tree, a white pine, and that's what's over here. And there's only one place on Godiva Mountain where they have those kind of trees.
Huh.
And so I know exactly where this sacred grove is as far as I'm concerned for Jesse Knight. Anyway, he's sitting there, and this impression comes to him. He can't get rid of it, so he goes up reluctantly, and he starts looking. And he hits ore at the June bug.
Was he a miner? Did he know what ore looked like?
No,
So
he took.
How did he
in
know
fact,
it
he
was
took. Well,
rich? How did he know it was?
that's what all the mine owners here said. He cheats.
He cheats.
God tells him where to dig. We have to go figure it out on our own.
It fed their
and we
animosity.
can't
They didn't
figure.
like it. It was just like the
Oh no, they did.
They were like,
and
God
he
is
wouldn't work
helping
on
them.
Sunday, but he would work them. He would pay them the same amount of money as they were getting if they were working at the Chief or somewhere.
This had almost
So-
200. This is Knightsville. 200 homes or something. At
Yeah,
that time.
500 people lived here. So anyway, he comes up and he hits ore at the June bug. He sells the June bug claim for $14,000 and moves from Payson to Provo. He builds in Provo. He builds the night block. You know where the night block is? Center Street and University Avenue. The center of Provo. The richest man in Provo has $14,000. That's real money in those days. Nobody else has any money, hardly at all. He builds him a home just to the east of there. So things are going along. I had talked to you before about when he organized, well, he called Carl G. Mazer and his group in, organized the Deseret Academy, becomes Brigham Young University. He works on all this kind of stuff. But while he's there, and again, a lot of the history goes back into about the 1902, 1903 time frame. And so right in that same time frame, the whole world's going through depression and everything. Well, the church had borrowed $1 million from a bank in Boston to establish the Perpetual Immigration Fund. These new converts were coming from Europe and moving into Salt Lake, going to work, working down in Sanpete County, all the way north.
They were baptizing
into,
and bringing them in. That
just
was
bring them in. But when they'd get here and they'd send them out to establish these communities throughout the whole Utah and Idaho and into Arizona, a little bit into Nevada, not much in Nevada, a little bit into Wyoming and those areas where they had all the Mormon communities around. But none of them had money. When they'd borrow the money from the Perpetual Immigration Fund to get here, when they went to pay it back, they paid it like they did their tithing. Every ward house had a bishop's storehouse right next door. And that's where you paid your tithing and your offerings, including your Perpetual Immigration Fund, because they didn't have cash. And so Wilford Woodruff was the president. He says, okay, we need help. The church needs help. Very few members of the church have any money. You bishops and stake presidents, this is in a special priesthood leadership meeting in October
Of what year?
of 1896. October of 1896. August of 1896, Jesse Knight had moved back, come back up and started, loaned out all his money, borrowed money, and he's in debt. He comes back and he hits or at the Humbug in August of 1896. So in October conference of 1896, Wilford Woodruff says, we need help. So Bishop Keller is the bishop in Provo, and he says, I'm getting ready to retire for the evening, and I have this impression to go talk to Uncle Jesse. And he says, okay, well, Jesse doesn't have any money. I know Jesse, and he's totally broken in debt. Go talk to Uncle Jesse. Well, he doesn't have any money. What am I supposed to do? Go talk to Uncle Jesse. Okay, it's too late now. I'll go tomorrow. Go talk to Uncle Jesse now. Okay, so he puts his shoes on, puts his shoes back on, grabs his jacket, walks down the street to Jesse's house. Jesse's, I think it was 2nd East in Provo, 2nd East and Center Street. And he says, I knock on the door. Jesse opens the door and invites me in. I go in and sit down at the parlor, and in the parlor, and he says, I start talking, small talk, and Jesse turns to me and he said, Bishop, you didn't come down here this time of night to talk about the weather. What do you need? And he tells him the church needs $10,000 to make this payment to the bank in Boston. Well, I don't have any money. I know it. Okay. And no, sit down. Meet me at the bank tomorrow. I've made a shipment. I don't have the money from the shipment yet. I don't know how much it's going to be. But let's go to the bank tomorrow and we can call around, we can find out, and we'll see what we can do. So he meets him at the bank the next morning, and Jesse goes through with the bank president, and they all sit down, go over the numbers, and said, Jesse writes him a check. The banker says, yeah, we're confident that the money's going to be here. Go ahead and write him a check. So he writes him a check for $5,000 and hands it to the bishop. Bishop leaves and goes and gets one of his, probably the elders' quorum president or whoever. Here, take this up to President Woodruff right now. So he heads out on horseback. Jesse sticks around, and he goes over the numbers and goes over. Finally decides, we can do better. We can do another $5,000. So he writes another check for $5,000 and gets one of his business partners to head to Salt Lake with it. And he's got the full $10,000 to make that payment, is on its way to Salt Lake or in Salt Lake already. And this is October. He makes the money back. He gets everything going. Everything's okay. We're all right. Now, eventually, he moves from that house and he builds a new home, a larger home on East. That home is now the Berg Mortuary. That was Jesse Knight's second home that he built in Provo. Later on, and I don't know how many years later, the family has some history on it, but later on, a couple of the apostles come and knock on his door. He comes in and he invites them in. They sit down and talk. They said, we have a problem. Some of the apostles have taken some of the church's money and invested it in a surefire investment that didn't turn out very good, and they've lost the money. So the church is short $10,000 from this transaction. And Jesse says, that isn't my problem. You better go back to those apostles that did that and make them pay it back. They don't have any money. They can't do it. He says, well, I don't know. Kind of sounds shady to me, but tell you what, come back tomorrow. I'll pray about it. And we'll see what God has to say about it. So the next day, the apostles come back and knock on his door. He opens the door and hands them a check and goes to slam the door in their face. And he says, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? He says, you came for the money, didn't you? And he says, yeah, but you seem upset. No, I'm not upset. But the next time you ask me for money, I'm just going to write you a check. He says, well, that's all fine and dandy too. But what's going on? What's really going on? He says, well, I told you I was going to pray about it. So I asked the Lord last night if I ought to write the church a check for $10,000. He told me I ought to make it for 20. So when you pray, make sure you're ready to listen. Because it might not be the answer you was looking for. Anyway, when he built this building, you can see they poured the concrete in here. They put the floor joists in before they poured the outside of the building. Because the floor joists are set in the concrete of the foundation. Quite a unique way to build it.
Yeah.
But it worked. All of those are cut. See that one right there? That was in the end. They're cut at a 45 so they could get them back out if they needed to, if one of them broke.
Huh. It's just hard to imagine there was over 100 homes up here
Yeah.
and not even a trace. This is about as
No, they were all wooden buildings built on. There's a few places where
You
you
can see
some rock
traces
foundation,
every now and again, huh?
but not much.
Wow.
This had a steam furnace. That was the where the steam went around through the rest of the building. There was a smokestack right there. There was big pillars on the front. This was an impressive building.
Huh.
You think in 1906, how many kids in Utah County went to a school that was concrete, stucco, plaster on the inside with steam heat?
Oh, yeah.
Most of them were going to school in a one-room clapboard with a potbelly stove up by the teacher's desk.
Yep. Huh.
So this was probably, at the time, this was probably one of the most modern, up-to-date schools in the state of Utah. As an elementary, middle school. If you got an 8th grade education, you was pretty highly educated in those days.
Cool.
That's the humbug.
Huh.
There's nothing in there. Humbug.
Jesse and his son Raymond were walking up the hill.
Up this ravine
yeah,
here?
come on. That's a whole day's work just getting up here.
Yeah.
But they're on their way up when they're working up here, and they got a night shift crew, and they're working the day shift. And as they're walking up, Jesse says, I want you to know, son, we'll have all the money we can handle as soon as the Lord understands that we know how to handle it. Because he obviously, when he sold the June bug, he didn't handle it right.
Yeah.
So he says, we've got to prove to the Lord that we know how to handle the money, how to take care of people. And Raymond said, we're so far in debt that we'll never even get out of debt, let alone ever have money. And Jesse repeats exactly the same word for word. A few days later is when they hit the ore in there. They're coming up the hill, and the night shift crew starts coming down the hill with a rock. They said, we hit the ore, and they said Jesse wasn't surprised at all. He just, it was just today, not tomorrow, was the only difference. So he says they walked on up, and they go back in, and you can see, but they're working with kerosene lanterns and candles, so you can't see very good up there. And that's a tunnel. It goes back in. He goes back in, says, yeah, it looks pretty good. So he loads the wheelbarrow up, and Jesse takes the wheelbarrow and wheels it out to the collar. When he gets to breaking into daylight, he says, looks at it and he says, yep, I've just done my last day's work where I'll take another man's job. Because he felt like his job was to take the money I get and create jobs for people. I don't need to work. I'll just take care of the money.
So he hired miners and was mining this, and he didn't have anything, he didn't know there was anything there for sure. He just said,
he knew.
This looks the spot.
Well, he took, the reason it's called the humbug, he found some of the rock along the surface here, and he took it to his brother-in-law, Mr. Roundy, and said, see, this indicates that there's ore. And Mr. Roundy looked at it and he says, humbug, that doesn't show me a doggone thing. He says, that's just a rock, and threw it back out. And so that's when he kept going and he hit the ore. They said, what's your name in the mine? He says, Roundy named it. It's the humbug.
Huh.
Then Roundy's shaft is just over here, and then Roundy did most of this. Right.
Hey,
Yeah.
where was the one that you?
Roundy was his brother-in-law, knew some mining. So once Jesse got into it, then
seen it.
Roundy was all involved in
Crown Point.
So how did you learn about all this history of Jesse Knight and all this? You just
reading.
you're a national treasure, Nick.
But what I was just telling him, I said, why I love being his friend is because I believe it's a gift, and I think there's a reason he has that. You know what I mean? Like, he knows certain things for a reason. Like, I think there's a reason there. And it's just a matter of kind of, because he takes people on tours all the time, and he tells you stories, ATV groups. I mean,
Thank you
just
for this tour.
stories. But what I'm saying is,
Yeah,
like,
we got to get a little
He's trying
earlier
to
start,
get it
and we'll
out.
do a
Yeah.
full tour.
point
But
to this story.
this just
There's
gives
a
us
reason. He knows what he knows.
this is just the
Tip of the ice.
tip of the iceberg.
Wow.
That's the way those people.
We're having we're doing
You know what I mean?
the mine company is putting out some money and putting on a dinner for everybody that wants to come. And you guys are welcome to come too.
Yeah, you gotta come.
On the 2nd of November, we're bringing the veterans. We're bringing 2 busloads out of Payson's Veterans Home, and then any other veteran that we can get.
Cool.
We're going to be on the radio advertising this in a couple of
You know
weeks.
who their big radio star here is? That one guy. He's
Yeah.
the name.
Doug Wright.
Doug Wright.
Oh, he lives here. He has a
Well,
town. He has a place
a
here.
couple of houses
places
here.
here.
Well, he has a house, and his son has a house. It was his house, but he gave it to his son.
But
So-
it's full of like he makes it like a museum.
Yeah.
Huh?
On his
Yeah,
house,
his whole
it's
house is just like
every
a
little
museum.
part has.
Yeah, we are on the Jesse Knight Railroad. This railroad
Oh,
went
this
from
was
just
where the
around there.
railroad was.
Yeah, it went from around when we got up to the highest point and started coming this way. We were on his railroad.
This is why
This is
the
the
mountain
Jesse Knight
bikers
Railroad,
are
and it
interested
goes all the way
here
around to
because-
Silver City.
because they were all steam engines, and so you have only like the grade on most
certain
of these.
grade,
some
huh?
are
Yeah,
rough,
2%.
2% or 3%. That's it.
Huh?
And so they had to level them so hard. But could you imagine a train running down this?
Over on the other side, it's much steeper. So but they were coming up there empty, and so they had a cogwheel, and the engines would come up the cogwheel from the Silver City side.
Hey, wasn't the chief at one time called the Ruby Gulch or something like that?
No, Ruby Gulch.
Yeah, tell me the name. Why
Okay.
what's Ruby Gulch?
Ruby Hollow is over where they first found ore. There are people that keep saying, well, the original name of Eureka was Ruby Gulch. No, it wasn't. Ruby Gulch is where they found the first ore, and that was where the Sunbeam Mine was the first mine in the Tinnick Mining District, and that was right over here. We'll keep moving now, and we'll go on past that. I'll show you where that was. But that was Ruby Gulch. Or Ruby Hollow, depending on who you're talking to. I think this here appears to me that this was a trestle. There's a little bit of a road that goes over here that comes up from the Colorado 1 up here. So this was just a mine dump, and it was holding back the waste here. But I think that was part of a road that came through to come in and hold it to get the ore down here to the railroad, as far as I know. But this was the Colorado 1 up here. The one we went past over here that the timber was laying down, just past the humbug after we went past that. The next one down, that's an open shaft about 1,400 feet deep. We can throw rocks down that one too, but it doesn't have a grade out on it, so it isn't anywhere near as fun.
It's kind of too scary.
Yeah, well, and that's Colorado 2. This is Colorado 1, that's Colorado 2. There's Colorado 3 somewhere, I don't know. There's so many of these, you can't keep them all straight. And you talk to somebody and they say, oh, that's what this was. No, and then they find out, no, that wasn't right. Wow. It was something else. Okay, this is the Black Dragon. They started this back in the 30s as an iron ore operation. In their operation, they kept running into this. You can see a little bit of this clay up here. That isn't really good stuff, but it's similar to what you'll find. You get on down in the underground here, and they find a lot of that halloysite clay. It's really, really white. Feels like soap.
Oh, this is the stuff he was talking about.
Yeah, this is the stuff I was talking about.
And they use this in, like, you know how you have pills and only a little drop of the actual medicine, they use that pill, right? Don't they
Right.
use
They're
kind of
using this.
There's
They're
a
starting
filler,
to
huh?
use it.
It's a filler.
This is the filler. This is what you can, because it's soft and it'll press, you can make your pill out of it. So, and it doesn't break down into your body. You don't absorb it. It just once it dissolves away, then it passes straight through and leaves the medicine to absorb into your body to do whatever it was supposed to do. So in the early 1940s, they figured out that this clay worked really good as a catalyst in their oil refining business. As they started refining oil, oil was becoming more and more usable all over. And so they stopped mining the iron and started mining the clay. Now they're using the clay for the medicines.
So this is over here is where they mine for the clay.
Well, right there.
Oh.
They go back into the mountain
it goes
right
into
there.
the mountain right there.
Yeah, that's just
that looks like
wagon
fresh. They're still mining it then, huh? Because that looks like fresh tracks going in there.
there's
Now, one
people
of the things,
working
is
here.
this the one that they're using for that special Utah brick?
No, this isn't for brick. The brick is from the.
There is a famous whatever.
Yeah, the Garrity mine around the hill, they were making fire brick out of, and they could still use it, but they have other places they can get similar stuff now. Anyway, they were mining the clay, and then the Filter Oil Company, who ran this until 1974, they were mining the clay, and that's when that museum over there was right down here, and then they stopped mining. And so they gave it to the Historical Society. Then another company came in, bought them out, and started using the clay for other things. They have several different things they use it for, but they're only shipping, 500 or 600 pounds here and there. They're not shipping it by the railroad car.
Yeah.
But now there was a guy called me a couple months ago, and he was in New York at the time, but he's out of Washington State. He's a salesman. And he's selling this iron in here because this has a lot of aluminum in it. And so they use it in concrete. So the concrete makers in out here in Lindell, what's that one?
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Anyway,
the concrete, the aluminum base in
the aluminum
concrete
and iron
makes it stronger.
and the clay and everything in there makes the concrete strong. So that's what they're planning on. He wanted to know, how can we get a railroad spur in Eureka? And he just left a message on my answering machine. And so when I called him back, I says, I don't know. You got to tell me a lot more about it than just Eureka, because coming in on the west side, you're going to want to use Union Pacific. If you're on the east side, you're going to want to go through DNRG, because DNRG's got basically everything tied up on that side. Union Pacific has everything on this side. But you can come right down there where that truck is. There's a railroad track. You can see the tracks right out there. That's the main line between Los Angeles and St. Louis. Back when I was a kid, we'd go down there to watch the passenger trains go by. And, when Willie sings about the city of New Orleans, the train they call the city of New Orleans, well, that's why they always named the train after the city that it was going to. So when a train was coming this way, it was called the city of Los Angeles. If it was going that way, it was called the city of St. Louis. And we'd go down there and wave at the people. They wouldn't wave back, but we didn't care.
You see this? It's like Wayne County out here. Look at the vast.
This is the area that I was telling you that Sam Houston was granted.
Yeah.
That area out in here. Frank McIntyre.
The cows, I'm sure, were appreciative.
Yeah, in about 1910, 1915, this was the largest cattle operation in the world.
Really?
And one day, Frank, one of the owners, gets a phone call. And the person on the other end just starts BSing, just talking small talk. And after a while, he says, "By the way, Frank, how many cows you running out there?" And Frank gives him probably a pretty accurate number. And he says, "Wow, that's strange. That isn't what you claimed on your income tax last year." And he says, "Do you know who you're talking to?" And the guy says, "No." And he says, "Well, this is so-and-so from the IRS." And he says, "Well, do you know who you're talking to?" He says, "Yeah, I think so, Frank McIntyre, right?" And he says, "Yep, biggest bullshitter west of the Mississippi." Yeah, the biggest reason I stopped here, see where that little road goes there? And it drops over on the other side.
Yeah?
Right along that ridge there is the Sunbeam Mine. George Rust was running cows down through here. in 1869, December of 1869. I wouldn't want to be out here in December.
Yeah.
On a horse.
Yeah.
He made camp on the other side of the hill there, underneath a rock outcropping to break the wind, because it was cold. The next morning he gets up and starts building his campfire to make his coffee and fry his eggs or bacon or whatever. And he looks up on the top of that rock outcropping, something's glistening off there. There's the sunbeam hits it, and it's really shiny. So he climbs up on the rock and chips it off, and it's a piece of galena that's high-grade lead and silver. And that starts the whole mining operations.
Oh, so this is where the rock was you was talking about.
This is Ruby Gulch, comes right up here. When we came across from the Utah County side into the Juab County side, we were at the top of Ruby Gulch.
Ah.
Ruby Gulch goes right on down and hits this silver divide road right down here. And that's why people will say, well, Eureka was first called Ruby Hollow or Ruby Gulch. No, this was Ruby Gulch. And that little town down here was Ruby Gulch. And then they found silver around here. That picture I was showing you with Jesse Knight, that's on around the hill here. And that's at the Swansea mine. And then these smelters right down there. So this was never...
I didn't realize there were so many mines here. I just thought there was 3 or 4 big ones.
No.
I never realized that.
There was 1,000 mines, but there was probably 30 or 40 that made pretty good money. I mean, if you could have been a millionaire in 1910 or 1915, you was making dang good money. And that wasn't the biggest mines. The biggest mines made a lot more than that.
Huh.
But you could have, if you was lucky, if you was the one out of 1,000 that hit some kind of ore up here, then you could have easily made $1 million. So,
cool.
not too bad.
Not bad.
There's your treasure.
That's the treasure.
Your treasure's in little pieces of gravel all through these mountains.
Yep.
It's not in a big brick.
Yep.
Yeah, right over there's the cemetery, and he owns some property there. This is the Jesse Knight smelter.
Oh, this was a smelter.
And then see the kind of a dark blackish and a little bit of red to it sand? That used to be about 30 feet high, and that covered that whole area down there. And back in the 50s, when they built Highway 6 across here, they'd sand the road. They didn't use salt at first. They were just, around here at least, they were using this as the sand, and they'd go by and spread it out. But they didn't have a sander. They filled the truck up, and then they'd take off, and took 3 guys to run a snowplow. So one guy was driving the snowplow and 2 guys in the back with shovels. And they'd go, one would go this way and the other one would go that way. So as you'd go down the road, you'd see there was a line of sand this way and this way and this way. X's all the way down the road, all the way out. Now this, in 1952, Dwight Eisenhower became President of the United States. Dwight Eisenhower had worked on the Lincoln Highway. He was out at Dugway. He put in what they called Goodyear Road. The highways were built using money from companies that would benefit from having automobiles. And so Goodyear donated the money to build Goodyear Road out through there, basically following, building the Lincoln Highway, basically following the Pony Express as much as they could, because they also had to have water, stations all the way along. An old car back in 1925, you could only go about as far as the steam engine. Every 20 or 30 miles, you had to stop and put water in and top off the tank of gas and fix a flat tire or something. You carried rubber patches and everything with you when you went, because you had to do it all yourself as you went. Anyway, there was a mismatch of highways all over in the United States, but there were no roads that went east coast to west coast. Dwight Eisenhower went to Congress and said, look, we got a problem we got to fix. We were watching everything during World War II, and we were very concerned about the Germans, and we were protecting our shipping lanes across the Atlantic. And then all of a sudden we get attacked. The first attack on American soil comes from the west. comes out of Japan and hits the Hawaiian Islands. We don't have any military, as far as we know, because we didn't have satellites and all that kind of information. As far as we knew, they were on their way to California. The Japanese were. So, and all of our military was on the East Coast. We didn't have a way to get our military from the East Coast to the West Coast in any decent way. And Congress said that's a state thing. Keep your nose out of it. It has nothing to do with the federal government. We're here to keep the Army. Well, yeah, but we need this for the Army. No, that's the states build their own highways within their own states. It says, yeah, but Nevada builds us a highway to go from Reno to Las Vegas, but you can't get to California or to Utah because they don't care about that. That isn't their priority. So we need something to get across the country. No, we're not going to do that. So he went to Congress and he said, can we fund this highway? We need it for the military. And so they had to put in some regulations for it. If you'll notice right out here, Highway 6, see where that's going nice and straight across there? Mm-hmm. This was the original Highway 6 here.
Oh,
that's
right
Highway
up through
6
here.
now.
Ah,
You see how much straighter it is?
yeah.
Didn't have to hit into each town. Every 5 miles of Highway 6, which was the first highway that went all the way across the country, every 5 miles there's 1 mile of straight and relatively flat where you can land an airplane.
Oh, really?
A 1952 airplane, not a Boeing 747. Yeah. But you could land an airplane so they could resupply their troops as they were going across the country. If you travel across Highway 6 and get into Nevada, there are still signs. I don't know why they don't have any in Utah, but in Nevada there's signs all the way along on the highway where there's any major intersection. As you come off of that major intersection, there's a great big sign. You know what they call the highway? You've been across Nevada.
Yeah.
What do they call Highway 6? What's the big name for it when they built it?
No?
Grand Army of the Republic Highway.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, really?
The Grand Army of the Republic Highway.
Huh.
Because it was a military highway. And so that was the beginning of the interstate highway system. When they got it through, finally Congress come around and said, you know what? There are things that the federal government ought to be doing that they can do better than the states can, because they can link it up. For example, right now, the last section of I-15 to go in, you know where that was? Down through the Virgin River Gorge. You know why it was the last one?
Arizona.
Because it was in Arizona, and Arizona didn't give a damn if they built that highway. Does Arizona zero good? There is nothing that is in Arizona along that stretch of highway. It does good for Nevada and Utah, but it does nothing
for Arizona.
That's true. And yet it's
Yeah.
in Arizona. So we expected the states to do it,
Yeah.
even though the states would get no benefit from it.
Yeah.
No, they aren't going to do it. So that's one of the examples of why we need a federal highway system, because we don't travel just within our state anymore. Back in the day, yeah, you had maybe 20 or 30 miles radius. Like we were talking about Herbert Hoover, who had his cars all over the country, had 5 different Model A Fords, each of them in an area where there was mining, so he could go check on his mining operation. He got there on the train. He didn't drive his cars across the country. There was no such thing as drive across the country. You could, but you better have plenty of water and lots of time if you was going to drive across country in an automobile in 1930.
Yeah, and even down in California, remember they had planks that they had to drive over the desert, because then they had to take the plank and then move it to the next.
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah, as the military was moving, they'd move those.
Running planks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Huh.
Another thing about the Virgin River Gorge is that I understand that it is one of the most expensive highways ever built in the United States per mile.
Really?
Yeah, it is the most expensive chunk of highway that they ever built in the United States.
Huh.
Because it's not like taking a cat out and digging a line along. But you can see here where Jesse Knight's railroad came in.
Oh, yeah.
We're off from the. You can see all the ties along on here.
Yep.
Now notice, and you'll notice as we go along, heading on around here, see how that black sand and how it's kind of black all the way along in there? That's the cinders from the old steam trains.
Ah.
And as you go around the hill here, if you get up on the railroad grade, you can really see that. And it's heavy, so it stays there.
Huh.
Now this pile right here, that's a heap leach. Back in 1973 or 74, right in there, the North Lily Mining Company decided they could make some money with the old mines that had been in existence around here. So they went all over the Tinnick Mining District and sampled their waste piles. And if they found any gold at all, then they would go to contact the mining company that owned that property and see if they could buy them the dump. And they bought the dumps, they crushed it down, brought it over here. Underneath that there's a layer of sand, and then there's a layer of rubber, and then there's another layer of sand and another layer of rubber, and then they piled all the dump from all of the different mines around the Tinnick Mining District. As you saw up around when we started, you could see where there was a mine dump, and it looked like they'd hauled off half of the mine dump.
Yeah.
That's what they did, actually. They brought it over here, crushed it up, and piled it up. And then they sprinkled that with cyanide. They had a sprinkler system just like you'd have on the farm. They'd move it around. All the water that went through with the cyanide went down, and it had leached the gold out. And you see how it's on this hill. Right down on the bottom end here, they had two big ponds. You'd pump out of the pond and circulate that around and around and around, sprinkling it across this hill. And then when the gold content got up to where they could recover it, they would move the water and have it go into the next pond and let this one dry out. They'd take that and clean the bottom of this reservoir up and melt it down and ship bars of gold. But that was all from the cyanide. And then after they got all the gold out of it, then they spent about 4 years just running clean water over it, so it washed all the cyanide out.